I cordially invite Dr. Manjula Banuri ma'am, Assistant Professor, Department of Biochemistry, University College of Science, Osmania University, Hyderabad, Telangana. She has 25 years of research and 13 years of teaching experience. Dr. Manjula Banuri ma'am worked at UTHC Memphis, USA as postdoctoral fellow and as research specialist in 2008. Her area of research interest includes identification of diagnostic markers for endometriosis and PCOS. Her field of study during her PhD is gynecological disorders such as endometriosis and PCOS. She is skilled in biochemistry, cell culture, and molecular biology. Her thrust of industry knowledge are polymerase chain reaction (PCR), Western blotting research, life sciences, and cell biology. Let me happily invite Dr. Manjula Banuri ma'am to deliver the topic environmental factors and endometriosis. Ma'am, I hand over the session to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Maheshwari. And then I extend my deep regards and thanks to Professor Dr. Muthuchellian and also members of organizing committee and also dignitaries and also participants. So the topic today we will be discussing is environmental factors and endometriosis. So, so this is acknowledgements I have already done, and once again, thank you very much, sir, Muthuchellian sir. So the outline of the presentation: the influence of environmental factors on human health, environmental pollutants as endocrine disruptors, endometriosis and endocrine disease, endocrine disruptors and endometriosis risk, need of the hour, measures to minimize the exposure to toxic environmental factors. So first, let us go with the environmental factors and human health. The old French word, N is in, viron is circle. This is a complex of climatic, edaphic, and biotic factors by which an organism is surrounded. Health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease. Major determinants of health are heredity and environment. So environment and health. So the types of pollution we have seen, like air, water, and the soil, and then there are both physical and biological factors which will affect the health. So gene and environment interactions. So you know, the nature and nurture both are important for the well-being of an organism. And there will be constant interaction of nature and environment, and the genes and environment will be in constant interaction. So our genes plus our environment and the lifestyle will decide what we are. So almost all chronic diseases are dependent on the environment. So especially the diabetes, cancer, reproductive diseases, etc. are all environment decided, dependent not only on heredity and also environment. So generally, how the environment impacts our health. So people are at the risk at homes and also workplaces, communities, and the factors which influence are from air, in form of pollution, air pollution, water sanitation, chemicals, and also the climate change and also agriculture practices. So 23% of the global deaths are linked to the environment. It corresponds to almost 12.6 million deaths a year. So top 10 causes of deaths are from the environment or non-communicable. These are the top 10 causes, the stroke and ischemic disorders. And out of 12.6 million deaths, 8.2 million are because of non-communicable diseases. So let us see what are the environmental pollutants which act as endocrine disruptors. So first, let us see what is an endocrine disruptor. Endocrine disruptor is a chemical that may interfere with the body's endocrine system and produce adverse developmental, reproductive, neurological, and immune effects in both humans and wildlife. A wide range of substances, both natural and man-made endocrine disrupting chemicals, are found in many everyday products. Endocrine disruptors are released into the atmosphere by industrial and or agricultural combustion, direct discharge, and runoff. slow to break down in the environment is the biggest utility of these products because they are not very easily biodegradable, and this character poses a potential health and environmental potentially hazardous risk. So these are some of the endocrine disruptors which are commonly used in the household things, like we have air fresheners, laundry products, detergents, non-stick ware, and then aluminum foil, etc. So let us see what are some of the common endocrine disruptors and their uses, like PBDs and then PCBs, BFRs, glyphosate and BPA, phthalates, lead, triclosan, and they have a lot of day-to-day uses. And as Mohan Kumar sir was telling about the GM crops. So actually GM crops are made resistant to herbicides, and this Roundup is a herbicide made up of environmental uh, endocrine disruptor, and it is not at all safe to the human beings. And according to WHO reports, there are 1,000 known endocrine disruptors, and because endocrine system is a very, very balanced system, and the hormones are the ones which will vital in regulating all the biological activities of a living creature, especially the human beings. And because if there is any change in the hormonal function, then it will cause illness, and even it may be fatal. So how these endocrine disruptors work? So generally an endocrine disruptor will work like a hormone. It will mimic hormone, and it can either increase the cellular response or it can decrease the cellular response to the mimetic. It is either the endocrine disruptor can increase or decrease the cellular response. And these endocrine disruptors causes several diseases like diabetes, cancer, schizophrenia, nerve damage, Alzheimer's disease, and lot of reproductive disorders like endometriosis, breast cancer, ovarian cancer, testicular cancer, etc. So these are the major environmental disruptors which act on reproductive health. They are PCBs, phthalates, dioxins, diethylstilbestrol pesticides, and estrogen chemicals, and endocrine disrupting pesticides. So a lot of research is going on internationally and nationally, and these are the places where the research is going on. So it's there in Spain, and there is Institute of Molecular Science Division of Molecular Environmental Endocrinology in Japan, and several countries are doing great research on these endocrine disruptors. So let us come to the focus of today's topic, endometriosis and endocrine disease, and how the endocrine disruptors will act on endometriosis. So endometriosis is a estrogen-dependent gynecological disease. About 90 million women of reproductive age are suffering with this disease, and the prevalence is 10 to 20% of the reproductive age women. It is more common than breast cancer and cervical cancer, and it occurs only in menstruating mammals. So not all mammals menstruate. Only the mammals which menstruate are humans, monkeys, bats. So this disease occurs only in the mammals which menstruates. So these are the celebrities who are suffering or suffered with endometriosis. You have seen this Padma Lakshmi, Katrina Kaif, Queen Victoria, Marilyn Monroe, Whoopi Goldberg, Hillary Clinton. These are the celebrities who either are suffering with endometriosis or suffered, who are no more. So let us discuss how this disease occurs. So endometrium is the inner lining of the uterus. This is the layer where the implantation takes place, and the fetus, this is the feeder layer for the fetus. So this is when the endometrium is present in its native location, it is called eutopic endometrium. And when this endometrium grows outside the uterus, then it is called ectopic endometrium, and this is the manifestation of endometriosis. So when it is inside the uterus in its native place, it is eutopic endometrium, and when it crosses this and then when it grows outside the uterus, then it is called ectopic endometrium, and this is the manifestation of endometriosis. So let us see the possible sites of endometriosis. So the most probable site is on the ovary, fallopian tubes, and on the bladder, and the peritoneum, and the rectal uterosacral segment. These are the common locations where the endometrial implants will be growing, and this is the possible sites where the disease occurrence takes place. So endometriosis can be in different forms. It can be in the form of adhesions. The different organs will adhere together, and then it can cause a lot of pain when there is a movement of the organ. And then it can be on the ovary in the form of cyst. Actually, you can see it is like a chocolate-like appearance. It is dark brown in appearance because of the old blood accumulated here. Such cysts are called chocolate cysts, and it can be in the form of lesions, and you can see different lesions. So these are the manifestations of endometriosis. So the epidemiology, the real incidence is unknown, and it is common in reproductive age women, and it won't discriminate by race. All women are susceptible to endometriosis, and the histology is endometrial gland and stroma will be growing outside the uterus, and it is considered as a hereditary disease because the incidence is more among the sisters and twins, and if the mother is affected with endometriosis, even daughter is at more risk to get endometriosis. The symptoms include the 80% of the females who are suffering with the disease get pain, pelvic pain. 80% of the patients will have pelvic pain, and dysmenorrhea is nothing but pain during the menstruation. So 60% of the female will get this symptom, and 40% of the females will have infertility. And in India, countries like India, so only the people with infertility problems will get diagnosed with endometriosis. Just chronic pain, females will take it, so they won't go for diagnosis. But the infertility patients, so in our research, we also do the research on endometriosis. I will come to that a little later. So in India, so the females will get diagnosed only there is infertility. All the patients what we have collected are infertile. So the diagnosis, how do you diagnose the disease? It's a big challenge. It is there is no non-invasive perfect diagnosis for the disease, and the gold standard for the diagnosis is laparoscopy, which is invasive, and there is no non-invasive marker for the disease. So the gold standard for diagnosis of the disease is laparoscopy, and the advantages of laparoscopy are it excludes other ovarian cancer because the symptoms may be similar for endometriosis and ovarian cancer. So it can discriminate and it can exclude other conditions like ovarian cancer. And if there is endometriosis, if there are any manifestations of endometriosis, laparoscopy can as well diagnose, and also it can act as a treatment. It can be treated at the same point of time. So this is a picture showing the diagnosis of endometriosis. This is the ultrasound image where you have seen the endometriosis, and this is MRI. So you can see the manifestations of endometriosis, and this is through invasive methods where you can see a chocolate cyst and then uterus lesions and all. So this is histology, which is the ultimate confirmation for the endometriosis presence. So this disease is really a very enigmatic disease because there are a lot of overlapping symptoms. So the symptoms are very overlapping with IBS, and other ovarian cancer. So it is difficult to diagnose, and there is a delay of diagnosis of the disease. In some countries, it takes 10 years to diagnose, and a minimum 4 to 5 years of diagnosis is required because there is no non-invasive marker for the disease. So there are different stages, stage 1, 2, 3, 4. So stage 1 is a minimal disease and stage 4 is a severe disease. So you can see only the lesions here. And in stage 2, this is called minimal, it is mild, you have more lesions. And at the stage 3, it is called moderate, and you have even the cyst in the ovary, and also in the stage 4, you have adhesions, cyst, and also lesions. So the treatment, so you have surgical and medical treatment. So surgical, you have conservative and non-conservative. So conservative is not removing all the reproductive organs, and non-conservative is removing all the reproductive organs like ovaries and uterus and also fallopian tubes. And in the conservative, there is a method called laparotomy, using the laparoscope, removal of the cyst and also the lesions. And because endometriosis is associated, so there is a nerve ablation by laparoscopy. Laparoscopic uterine nerve ablation can be done so that it will relieve the pain symptoms. Medical treatment includes the pain management by using non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, and most of the treatment is based on hormones. That is because this is an estrogen-based disease, so most of the treatment options are based on hormones, like selective estrogen receptor modulators and selective aromatase modulators and oral contraceptive drugs and GnRH agonists. So all these hormone-based therapies are also used to as a treatment for endometriosis. So, but sometimes treatment is more bigger than disease. So, because this treatment options are will cause a lot of side effects. So, and also they are not really in some patients they won't work also. So they cause a lot of side effects and a lot of limitations. So even surgery is not very effective in some cases. So after surgery, also after removal of the reproductive organs, 25% of recurrence is seen in some cases, and 50% of the cases after 5 years there is a recurrence, and 80% of the 40 to 80% of women will have pain again after 2 years of surgery. So this indicates that disease is very enigmatic disease and very complicated disease. So this is a picture which shows the surgical laparoscopy where the implants are excised by laparoscopy, and then sometimes implants can be burned and sometimes implants can be removed by using laser. So this is also a picture where a laparoscopy is done. So the main thing is the only goal is to manage the disease. The management of endo is the emerging trend. So as we are understanding the disease more, it is emerging as more complex disease. So there is no cure, and medical therapy targets only symptoms, and it is associated with a lot of side effects, and surgery is associated with high recurrence rates, and endometriosis is associated with 50% increase in the risk of cancer, especially the ovarian cancer. So this endometriosis is a very potential gynecologist dilemma. So it is debilitating disease, it's a progressive disease with no cure, and history of multiple operations, and diagnosis is also a big question. So the prevalence, because many women won't go for diagnosis, so the prevalence rate is very difficult to know. And most of the people who are experiencing pain or infertility will go, and some people are asymptomatic too. And the pathogenesis is not very well understood. And also the 70 billion, so the healthcare cost for this is 70 billion every year. So it may be more than that. So there are a lot of publications and research going on, but still it is a big challenge for the gynecologist. And we have a lot of technologies and then new techniques, but still with all our technological advances, but still it remains as elusive and also very complicated disease. So March is the endometriosis awareness month, and this yellow ribbon is the logo sort of thing for endometriosis. So, we will discuss about the pathogenesis now, coming back to our endocrine receptors, the environmental pollutants. So it is, many reports and research says that it is estrogen dependent, and this is one of the major causes. The estrogen is one of the estrogen excess or estrogen increase is the major cause for the disease. So there are different theories which has been put forward for understanding the pathogenesis. That is Sampson's retrograde menstruation theory. That means the menstrual fluid will retrograde back. It will backflow. There will be a backflow of the menstrual fluid, and it will fall into the peritoneum, and there it will grow as endometrial implants will survive, and then it will grow. That's what the retrograde menstruation theory of Sampson's will reveal. And another is coelomic metaplasia, where the multipotent cells in the coelom itself will grow, and then they will cause some lesions and then inflammation, and then that is also can cause endometriosis. This is called Mayer's theory. And another theory is vascular and lymphatic dissemination theory of Halbens. The Halbens is a person who has put forward this theory. And some cases of endometriosis, we have seen what are the probable places where endometrial implants are formed in the peritoneum, like ovary and bladder and other regions of the uterus and fallopian tubes. But there are some cases where the endometriosis occurs in ear, nose, and kidney, some other places. So those particular manifestations are not explained by these two theories, because this theory says it is retrograde menstruation. The possibility of this manifestation will be in the peritoneum, and this is in the coelom. But this vascular and lymphatic dissemination theory can explain the further places where endometriosis develops. So let us discuss how these endocrine disruptors will enhance the risk of endometriosis. So we have discussed that this is the inner lining of the uterus. This is endometrium. So because the most accepted theory is retrograde menstruation. So during menstrual cycle, some of the menstrual fluid will retrograde back, and it will fall into the peritoneal cavity. And generally, in many females, in 90% of the females, this particular phenomenon will occur. But all won't develop endometriosis, because the immune surveillance will take care. If there is any foreign body, because this is utopic, it should not grow here. So if it is growing here, then the immune cells will attack that and they won't allow it to grow. But in these patients, there is a dysregulation of immune surveillance, and because of that, the utopic endometrium will grow in the ectopic sites. And also, there is a major role for estradiol or estrogen, what we call, for the growth of these endometriotic implants, because the estrogen acts as a major growth factor for these implants. So the excess of estrogen is the major culprit for the disease development, cause, and also the progress. So let us see the estrogen dominance. So you can see in normal utopic endometrium, there will be the conversion. This is the inactive form, and this is the active form of estrogen. So there will be equal reciprocation of these two. The concentrations are maintained. But in the case of endometriosis, the estrogen, estrone is converted into estradiol. So the balance of estrone to estradiol is disturbed here, and then a lot of estradiol, the active form, is generated in the endometriosis patients. So, and also these implants will also synthesize a lot of estrogen. So and then it will become a cause and consequence, and it will form a cycle. And then it also, actually, estrogen has two receptors, alpha and beta. And in different organs like breast and then uterus and ovaries, the distribution of alpha and beta are variable. But here, there will be a lot of disturbance in the estrogen receptor alpha and beta, and also the active and inactive form of estrogen is disturbed, and that is a major cause of endometriosis. That's what the researchers feel, and most are accepted, but not 100%. So let us see the risk factors. So the inflammation, because something is growing outside the, so some alien tissue is growing in the other regions. So then there will be a lot of inflammation. Even the immune surveillance is low, but still there will be a lot of immune response, but it may not control the growth, but it may cause inflammation. So inflammation and also environmental toxins. Environmental toxins will play a very important role, especially the endocrine disruptors, what we have seen just a few minutes back, and immune dysfunction. And then dysfunction is nothing but the immune surveillance is downregulated, and the gut microbiome, estrogen dominance. All these factors are very risky for the cause and also the progression of the pathogenesis of this disease. So this is the disease triangle. So environment and the lifestyle. So taking of a lot of steroid-like hormones, and then exposing to pollution, dioxin, and endocrine disruptors, and also radiation. So the women are more susceptible, and also stress is also one of the important factors which will disturb the hormones, and on the top there is heredity, age, race. Won't discriminate race, but some races are more susceptible, and immunological factors will also play a major role in the cause of this disease. So endocrine disruptors, this is estrogen. If you see the structures of DDT, which is a pesticide, and bisphenol, which is used in plastics, and genistein, it is a phytoestrogen, and this is dioxin, which is seen in incinerated products, organic things in industrial waste. So all these, they have some similar structural features, and they mimic estradiol, and then they can disrupt the function of estrogen. So this is so the dioxins. So this is the pathway. A lot of cellular signaling pathways are disturbed by all these endocrine disruptors, and then there will be a cellular response which is not favorable. So most of the times it is carcinogenic, and then it can cause either endometriosis or endometrial cancer. So these are the receptors. For dioxin is the major studied endocrine disruptor. So it acts through aryl hydrocarbon receptors, and then it has a lot of interaction with estrogen alpha beta receptors, and also it can it will disrupt the entire signaling pathway, estrogen signaling pathway, and then it can cause overgrowth of the tissue, and then that's how it will result in either cancer or the diseases like endometriosis. So what do previous studies say? In 1970s, the disethyl stilbestrol was given to prevent miscarriage in pregnant women. So the daughters of these women showed increased risk of endometriosis. So in 1993, so there was a rhesus monkey connection was seen, because monkeys will also show spontaneous endometriosis. They were fed with food contaminated with dioxins, and they developed endometriosis. And in 2009, an Italian study linked this disease to PCB and DDT exposure. And also, women with high concentration of benzophenone, a sunscreen chemical in the blood, had higher risk of endometriosis. So better avoid using sunscreens. So and the compounds, the compounds or the products which have chemicals like benzophenone. So this is yesterday I have just seen the what is the research, and this is a PubMed, like I have seen given the words like endometriosis and keywords like dioxin, and you could see 139 results. And ditylstilbestrol, I could see 87 results. And then with bisphenol A, 34, and phthalates, I could see 42 results. So there is active research going on in this particular field. So there are two new drugs which has been developed recently, in the sense in 2015. So these again, they target estrogen receptor, or estrogen receptor alpha or beta. So let us see once they are into the mainstream, and let us see what impact they have on controlling endometriosis. There is another, these are the commonly used medication, letrozole, anastrozole, and arno, Armacin are made by different famous companies, Novartis and Pfizer. These are all aromatase inhibitors. So the aromatase plays a very important role in estrogen synthesis and conversion, in aromatization of estrone and estradiol. So if you see the treatment options, they are all surrounding estrogen, and then the endocrine disruptors like dioxins and all will disrupt the estrogen balance with progesterone, and it will cause main threat to the risk of several diseases and also cancers. So coming to our research, so we are working from 2000. So I was in CCMB in 2001. So it was funded by Wellcome Trust, and then next it was like DST Women Scientist in 2003, and then DST Young Scientist 2009. That was in OU, and then we recently got one more fund from ICMR through GIA, Grants in Aid, so it to get released because of COVID. So we have collected 1,500 samples, 800 cases, and 700 controls, and still we are working on that. We are working from past 20 years, but still we are clueless where exactly is what is happening. We are working hard for that, but it is such a complicated and multifactorial disease. It is very difficult to get clue what is happening and what is a specific diagnostic marker for the disease. So these are the strategies. So we have genome-wide screening, and then we have candidate gene analysis, and we have tissue microarrays, and then just now Mohan Kumar sir was telling about SNPs, single nucleotide polymorphism. So we see the single nucleotide polymorphisms taking cases and controls, and we have worked out on these genes, Wedger 506, Enostat 6, P53, BRCA, P10, and the entire mitochondrial genome. So we got some insights and also some interesting results, but it is not like yes or no situation. For a diagnostic marker, it should be yes or no in the case and control. So we have some statistical data where it is low or less or more, but it is not yes or no situation. So we are still struggling hard to get a possible diagnostic marker for the disease. So these are the SNP analysis. It's just Sanger sequencing method. So like that we have done for several genes, thousands and thousands of sequencing. And also we have developed a rat model, because it's, ethical issues will be there. We cannot directly go and work on humans. So in rat model, because rats won't have menstrual cycle, they have a stress cycle. So we need to surgically induce the disease, and we have developed a rat model when I was in CCLB, and then still work is going on that. These are the results of rat model. So this is our, these are our publications. So, and this is one of our books. The first thing is one should know what this disease is, and then what are the symptoms, so that we can get early diagnosis and some sort of prevention also, and then some care. So there are several national and international organizations, and then in several countries, there are some organizations. We have Endometriosis Society in India and Endometriosis Association in Australia, and several countries we have in She Trust in UK. so in Endometriosis Foundation in America. So there are a lot of organizations which are trying to get awareness among the females, but still a lot needs to be done. So there is one more organization called endometriosis.org. This is a global forum for news and information on endometriosis. So this also works a lot in awareness among the females. And so there are a lot of events in the month of March to know about the disease and the status of the disease. So take home message is endometriosis is a mystery for gynecologists, and it requires decision making at every stage by the doctor and the patient, and it is still stand as one of the most investigated disorders in gynecology, so is one of the highest priorities for research. So let us summarize. So we have seen, so it is enigmatic disease, and there is no non-invasive diagnostic marker, no cure, and research currently is aiming the diagnostic marker, non-invasive marker. Then if we get a marker, then it can act like a therapeutic target also. So just I just made this, Siddharth Mukherjee's book, The Emperor of All Maladies. So it has won the Pulitzer Prize. So this is Emperor of All Maladies, and then a biography of cancer. So I felt the empress of all pain is endometriosis. So that is the biography of endometriosis. So what is the need of the hour? So we should minimize the exposure to toxic environmental factors. So right now, currently, the environmental factors and are the major threat. So especially the endocrine disruptors. So many countries have banned many toxic chemicals like lead. They have banned in 2018. So they have banned fire retardant chemicals in children's products, mattresses, and in 2017 the phthalates have been banned, and FDA has banned BPA in 2013 in packaging and bottles. And National Institute of Nutrition, the National Institute of Health, the NIH, has launched Precision Medicine Initiative in 2015 and Cancer Moonshot Initiative in 2016. So the major goals of these is to intervene on complex chronic diseases by researching the interactions between genetic variation, some environmental factors, and lifestyle choices of individuals. So we can improve our environment to improve our health. So we, as a consumers, we are really powerful agents for change. So we can use low carbon strategies in energy generation and more active public transportation, and we can introduce clean fuels for cooking, heating, and then we can reduce occupational exposures and improve the options, and we can have safe water, and also we can change consumption patterns. So go for organic and less harmful chemicals. So and also we need to sunscreen protective behaviors instead of sunscreen lotions and all. We can have a hat or some other umbrella or something, and then smoking, tobacco smoking can be stopped. So sustainable, healthier environments are always required to get a proper health. And for the awareness, and people are having this World Environmental Health Day. It is celebrated on 26th of September. So it is by the International Federation of Environmental Health. And then the significance is educating the general public. So how to avoid the and how diseases and what precautions to be taken. And many government organizations are working hard to improve the food safety, sanitation, and also the air quality. And we have seen the COVID and lockdown, and we have seen a lot of improvement in the air quality also. So, and the theme of this year of this World Environmental Health Day is climate change challenges, time for global environmental health to act in unison. And there is an institute, National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences. It has celebrated 50 years in 2016. So the mission is the environmental effects the people in order to promote healthier lives. So they use state-of-art technologies to improve the human health and decrease the environmental exposure to toxic chemicals. So there is interesting. This thing is sustainable solution for the environment (SSC). This is taken care by a multidisciplinary consultancy from IIT Bombay. So they give a lot of models how to reduce the environmental risk. So you can go for it if you are planning for something. And safety, health, and environment. So health, environment, safety. So this is very crucial. So we also celebrate international celebration as Earth Day. So 22nd April we have celebrated. This is the 50th year. So this is Make Everyday Earth Day was the logo. And the thing is go green before green goes is another theme. So these are some of the environmental disasters we have seen, we have witnessed in the history. Dust Bowl, Great Smog, Minamata, Bhopal gas tragedy, and then Chernobyl nuclear disaster, and then Gulf War, and then oil pollution in water. So let us learn from history and never repeat the history. So we should not make, already this is a very, very complicated disease with polygenic pathogenesis, with a proper understanding of the etiology and difficulty in diagnosis and difficulty in treatment. So if we add much more from the environment, it will become much more complicated. So better we take proper awareness and precautions to decrease exposures to these endocrine disruptors and other pollutants so that we avoid such disease risks. So prevention is always better than cure. So the logo and our oath should be reduce, reuse, recycle, restore, and replenish. So thank you. Thank you once again for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Muthujalyan sir.
Yeah, thank you.
So before winding up the session, I may end the session with a note. Obstacles don't have to stop you. If you run into a wall, don't turn around and give up. Figure out how to climb it, go through it, or work around it. So thank you, one and all. Have a good day.